Welcome, everyone. It's 12 o'clock. And I'm delighted. I'm Dr. Harold Koenig, and I'm delighted to introduce our speaker, Dr. Donna Ames. She's going to talk. The title of her presentation is A Road to Jerusalem, a psychiatrist's journey to a holistic bio-psychosocial spiritual approach to mental health recovery. Dr. Ames is a psychiatrist and professor emeritus at UCLA with over 30 years of serving veterans at the West Los Angeles VA healthcare system. Her CV includes over 100 publications about medication treatments and side effects, psychosocial treatments, and now recovery-oriented bio-psychospiritual approaches. She received funding from the VA Merit Review Program, NIMH, and the VA Office of Patient-Centered Care and private foundations. She has worked in inpatient and outpatient psychiatry and developed a psychosocial recovery and rehabilitation center. She collaborated with the chaplaincy at the VA for about 10 years and also with me in developing a moral injury symptom scale as well as spiritually integrated treatments for moral injury. She's a daughter, wife, mother, aunt, great aunt, and grandmother. And Donna is a very close friend. We've worked very, very closely together over the past, I think, 8 years, doing research together at the VA. And I'm just thrilled to be able to introduce her to you. Donna, take it away.
All right, thank you, Dr. Koenig. I'll start sharing the screen. So I'm very, very, very grateful to be here today to speak with you about a personal journey in my research career and personal spiritual journey, because I think the spiritual journey affects the research. So let's see, this is my disclosure slide. And then let's see. So what is a spiritual journey? And I think we all have these kind of questions, and the patients that we work with have these kind of questions. Where am I going? Why am I doing? What am I doing? What do I worship? And I think these are very important questions to consider as you see patients in your office. I am a psychiatrist, a clinical psychiatrist, and most of my research has been in clinical psychiatry for about 40 years. So when patients come in your office, where are they going? Where do they think they're going? Fear of death may be something very important to address with your patients. Where do they think they go? Why am I doing? What am I doing? And what do I worship? Worship is something that we do. And people who walk in our offices are worshiping different things. And I have a lot of experience with dual diagnosis patients, so people with substance abuse issues. And what you notice is that people start worshiping their substances. We can all worship things that are not going to keep us on the right path. Power, money, prestige, these can all be things we worship. We may even worship people in our lives. And so when you have people coming in your office, these are things to think about as you contemplate how you're going to help them and how you're going to help yourself too, because you might find your own path at times too, torn between worshiping different things that take you away from what really give you genuine joy in your life. This is from a trip that I took to Israel with my husband. We were there in 2019 on Yom Kippur, the highest holy day in Judaism, and it was really an amazing experience. If you ever get to go there, the entire country shuts down. There's no traffic. It's very quiet and peaceful, and people are just walking in. This is walking into the old city to worship, and it's really quite a great trip to go this time of year. Yesterday was Yom Kippur, as a matter of fact. And this is my husband and me in front of the Western Wall, which is a beautiful place. It's one of the holiest sites for the Jewish people. So when we're on a journey, what inputs do we have? What things do we read on our journey? What influences our walk in life? And for me, I started my spiritual journey as a young kid in a conservative Jewish household, and this was these are the teachings from Judaism, the Tanakh. And I was a very good Hebrew student. I learned Hebrew. It made no sense to me though, because I would read prayers and not know what I was saying because I didn't understand what I was saying, and I didn't have time to read the English. So I have to admit that I never fully read the Tanakh till I retired from, beginning to end, retired from my career. And I've read it in the last year, as well as the New Testament. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful read. So does your worldview on your journey, is that affected by your religious upbringing, by the things that you've learned? I can say that when I got to college, and I was very determined to be a psychiatrist, I wanted to save lives. A friend of mine had committed suicide in high school. And this book, I think, formed my worldview. The teachers I had were very influenced by it. On the origin of species, means of natural selection, or the preservation of favored races, Struggle for Life by Charles Darwin. This book, largely through the famous Scopes trial in the 1920s, became what most people started to think about in terms of how we develop as human beings. And the creationist view became less and less. And then here's a book that I studied in college, Animal Behavior and Evolutionary Approach. And I remember my parents called me one day to say, it's the high holidays. Are you going to practice and go to, temple? And I remember saying, I'm not Jewish anymore. I'm just basically your genetic investment. And that became kind of a joke, but I really think that I was really influenced by evolution and a whole different view. And since I didn't really have a clear understanding of my own religious view, being taught Hebrew but not really understanding, I think this became my view. And I would say I became a bit of what you might call an agnostic, if not almost an atheist in my college years, believing in science and having a different viewpoint. And this Holy Bible is what I finally read after I retired from beginning to end. And so it's very interesting on your journey. What are you reading? What influences the way you behave and the things you do? This is a trip we also recently took with most of our family, our kids and grandkids, to the Ark in Williamstown, Kentucky. It's built to the specifications in the Bible, which is very interesting and an amazing sight to see. Next to Jerusalem, this was a very wonderful spiritual experience for my children and grandchildren to come on. So when you're on a journey, who are you going with? Who are you taking on your spiritual journey? Who can you take? There's a book that my husband read to all the kids growing up called Pilgrim's Progress. And it's a story of a journey. It's a pilgrim who's wanting to get to the celestial city, which is a metaphor for heaven. And along the way, he gets very distracted. I think we can all relate to this. This is a little painting I did. One thing I've done in retirement is try to do a little artwork for things. But anyway, this celestial city was a metaphor for heaven. How do we get to heaven? Where are we going after we die? And the pilgrim, who's the guy on the left, he gets distracted. I mean, but he keeps on going, and he travels with a couple of guys called Faith and Hope that eventually get him there. But he even has to cross the river at this point and nearly drowns. So in my personal research journey, I think being affected as I was by sort of a biological viewpoint of things and a behavioral viewpoint where I saw people as brains with chemicals in them that needed to be fixed. And I worked with the most seriously mentally ill patients. I started in the early 80s, and I was one of the people involved with a Harvard professor, Dr. Theo Mantrek, to demonstrate that people with schizophrenia had neurologic soft signs. So that this was disease, schizophrenia. It was very much my orientation. And I moved to California, and I became involved in the development of every antipsychotic medication. And at the time that I started my career, we had very bad medicines, antipsychotic medications, in terms of causing what we call extrapyramidal side effects, which are horrible movement disorders. And patients didn't like to take the medications because of these side effects. And then I got involved in developing new medicines, which unfortunately caused metabolic side effects. And because I was one of the people with my hands on these medicines at first, I was one of the first people to discover that these medicines cause diabetes and obesity. So we switched from having these side effects of movement disorders, which were debilitating, to having life-threatening diabetes and obesity as side effects. Yet, as a psychiatrist, I found that my patients accepted the medications more, the newer medicines, because of the fewer extrapyramidal side effects. So then I became involved in studying interventions to help reduce side effects. So my journey was very much psychopharmacological, very much, how do I treat this illness? And I saw schizophrenia as a cancer, almost like cancer, an untreatable, uncurable. So my group and I started testing interventions using primarily exercise and nutrition to help our veterans to lose. And then at this point in my career, I switched from being an inpatient and outpatient doctor to develop a recovery program. Recovery programs throughout Los Angeles, similar to developing recovery programs in 3 states. That's how big the area is that we worked on to change all day treatment and day hospital programs to recovery model. And I learned about the recovery model at this point and started becoming more interested in things other than medications to help people. And I learned about 8 therapeutic lifestyle changes. And we found that those included religious and spiritual activities. And I will go a little bit more as we go through. And we started applying the bio-psychosocial-spiritual approach to serious mental illness. And during this career, I also met Dr. Koenig and learned more about moral injury measurements and interventions. So the summary of what I'm going to cover with time provided during this talk. This is another journey. This was two gentlemen. These are veterans. And one of these veterans took a gun to his head and was going to kill himself. He was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And then his friend came out to help him. He came out and flew out. And they started a tour on their motorcycles throughout the country. If you want to watch this movie, it's very moving. But it's about the inefficacy of most treatments that are in 2013 were available for people with post-traumatic stress disorder. And their journey on their motorcycles was to find out, are there other things? And that's what my journey's been too. Is it more than medications? What can we do to prevent suicide? Because that's why I went into this field anyway, when my friend died when I was 15 by suicide. So how do we prevent suicide? 22 veterans a day. Think of the number of young men killing themselves and women. So these are the rates of veteran suicide from the November 20 Veteran Suicide Report. And if you look at this graph, the black line is the younger age group, the black line here. So we're having the highest amount of suicide in the younger folks. And then here's your 55 to 74 age range people, your 35 to 54, and you're 75 plus. So at this point, these are the rates. And one thing that struck me in looking at this graph versus this graph, this is a graph that shows religious service attendance. This was done in 2010. So I wish I had a more updated version of this, but as you can see, this is the number of people going, the percent of people going to religious services. We have millennials at about 18%. And we have Gen X's at this point, 27%, baby boomers, 32, the silent generation at 44, and the greatest generation at 56. So I imagine these numbers are probably even lower. And one thing that struck me is it seems that the people killing themselves are not the ones attending religious services. And we also have very high rates of suicide amongst physicians. It's estimated that one physician a day is killing themselves. Can you imagine that? Imagine all the work you go through to become a doctor and you kill yourself. One physician a day. These are very high rates. And this is comparing estimated suicide rates. Physicians, 28 to 40 over 100,000, one per day. Veterans, 30 to over 100,000, 20 per day. So this is a huge problem for the medical profession. Why are doctors killing themselves? Why? Why are veterans killing themselves? This article was encouraging to me. Religious service attendance and deaths from despair, care providers. This looked at a huge amount of healthcare providers and found that religious service was protective, and that people who are dying of deaths of despair, and that would be like substance abuse related deaths, suicide, that the people who were having attending religious services, there was a protective effect. So again, I'm a doctor who's come from a very biological viewpoint to more of a recovery oriented holistic viewpoint. And the definition of recovery is a journey. It's a journey of healing and transformation, enabling a person with a mental health problem to live a meaningful life in a community of his or her choice while striving to achieve his or her full potential. Now, when I first went to my career, I would never imagine that somebody with schizophrenia could recover and have a job or go to school. Again, I was viewing it as a very hopeless illness with very little ability to help people. And so that's why I was very eager to try new pharmacologic treatments. But what I did discover when I became the PRC program leader was that the recovery model is effective. And this recovery model comes from the substance abuse world. It comes from people trying to help themselves in recovery from with 12-step programs and whatnot. And so I believe in my career, what I've learned is that recovery, using the recovery model with your patients, is suicide prevention. And for those of you in psychiatry now, you know that you spend a great deal of time making suicide prevention plans. So the idea here is to make recovery plans. Let's reframe it. Let's reframe what we're going to do. We're going to prevent suicide, but we're going to talk about your recovery. And for patients, for many of those who thought because they had schizophrenia or some other serious mental illness that there was no hope, how do you instill hope? And the recovery model involves, it's a veteran-centered, it includes a holistic, multidisciplinary approach. It has social workers, nurses, psychology, and psychiatrists, chaplains, and community resources. The goal of the recovery model is to achieve community integration. Recovery embraces the notion that people with serious mental illness can live a meaningful life. And one psychiatrist who affected my thoughts on recovery is happiness is a byproduct of living a meaningful life. That's Viktor Frankl. So how do we help people who are feeling hopeless find meaning and purpose? And these are the 10 components of recovery. And again, this applies to the substance abuse community. It applies to the mental health community. This is from SAMHSA, and recovery involves, it's person-driven. There's many pathways. It's holistic. You involve peers. Peers are a very important part of recovery. Other people been down the journey you've had. It's relational. It involves addressing trauma and the culture that the patient is from. You look at the person's strengths and give them responsibility in their recovery, and respect. You want to help them feel respected, and hope. Hope is the traveling companion to the pilgrim in Pilgrim's Progress that helps you get to the celestial city. So recovery embraces a holistic approach, which I believe is bio-psychosocial-spiritual. And my husband and I developed a little scale because I had very high volumes of patients. We developed this little scale, the bio-psychosocial-spiritual scale, to assess how patients were doing in our recovery-oriented program, and also in some of the research that we did. I have a strong and healthy body. I have a sharp and clear mind. I have a talkative cockatiel background. I'm sorry. He is covered up, but he wants to join in. I have positive connections to other people, experience personal peace and happiness. These were 4 questions we asked patients to get a sense of where they were at the beginning of their recovery journey with us, and then at the end of their work in a recovery-oriented program. Spiritual, what does spiritual mean to the clinician? What does it mean to the patient? A lot of times you talk to a patient and they'll say, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. This is a common statement that I would run into with many of the patients that I work with. What is the difference between the spirit and the soul? When a person comes in your office, it's my orientation that this is a spiritual being. If we're spiritual beings, we're all struggling with a relationship problem. Now, I can say that's my orientation now. It wasn't my orientation in the beginning, as I've been explaining with my journey from looking at people as biological entities in an evolutionary kind of way, primarily, compared to seeing that we really are spiritual beings, and that these spiritual beings are struggling with relationship problems often. Glaser is another psychiatrist who really impacted my work with patients. He never used a psychiatric medication with any of his patients, and he felt that everything was a relational problem, and even with people with schizophrenia. And by the way, with schizophrenia, there is a 30% placebo response rate. There are high levels of placebo response rates to medications, meaning if I gave you a pill that was inactive with schizophrenia, you have a 30% chance of getting better. Also with depression, 50% chance of getting better with an inactive pill. I'm not saying anything against medications, but I'm saying that there is a lot of magic with giving a patient a pill. As a doctor, people will get better even if it's an inactive pill, especially if the doctor is hopeful and positive, encouraging. This medicine will help you. Is there a problem in a relationship with yourself, self-loathing with others? Is there a problem with relationship with God or higher power? So basically, when people come in your office, those are the relationships that you would see them struggling with. How do these relationship problems affect their soul, the mind, the will, the emotions? This is a definition of spirit too. What's the difference between spirit and soul? Watchman Nee, he described the spirit as conscience, intuition, and communion. What is happening when the person comes in your office? Is it the mind? Is it the will, the emotions that we're dealing with as psychiatrists? Is it their conscience, their intuition, their communion with something bigger than them, the higher power? My husband developed this little scale too that we have not validated, but I started using. Again, I had about 500 patients in my outpatient program, and I wanted to get a clear sense when they walked in the office very quickly using short, not very wordy scales. So we would ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how are they doing in their relationships with others, self, or higher power? So 3 questions are helpful in sorting out suicidal risk, I believe. And basically, if the person hated themselves, they'd be a 0, hate other people, 0, and didn't believe in anything bigger than themselves. Nothing. They were the person I'd be most worried about. These are a couple of quotes. In my retirement, I've been reading C.S. Lewis over again, and he has these books, the Chronicles of Narnia, which are allegorical and wonderful children's books, but they're also great for adults. And this last book of his, The Last Battle, I found 2 quotes that really hit me at home. If we find ourselves with a desire nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. And then at the very end, I guess this is a spoiler alert, the very end of the Chronicles of Narnia, they see the new Narnia. And one of the animals said, I have come home at last. This is my real country. I belong here. This is the land I have been looking for all my life, though I never knew it till now. And I do believe that when people come in your office, nothing satisfies them. They will be coming in, trying to find things in this world to satisfy them. And so, again, I think that points more to the fact that there's this giant hole that is needed to be filled with purpose and meaning and a connection to a higher power. So we started, as I mentioned, we converted all day treatment programs and day hospitals in the VA to psychosocial rehabilitation and recovery centers. This was mandated that we adopt the recovery model for the treatment of mentally ill, seriously mentally ill. So the difference between a PRC and a day treatment day hospital were quite stark. In a PRC, you have veterans doing things for themselves as opposed to you doing things for them all the time. So day treatment and day hospitals tended to be sort of outpatient warehouses for the mentally ill with very little of leaving those programs. So the idea of the PRC was community integration, getting them out in the community and not stigmatizing and not keeping people warehoused. Each veteran developed a personal recovery. For those of you in mental health, this recovery plan was approved by Joint Commission and CARF. These are regulatory bodies in the United States that we would have to meet 3,000 things to prove that we were a recovery-oriented program. So in order to make the transition from day treatment to day hospital programs, one of the things that got checked off of 3,000 on your inspection by Joint Commission or CARF was that each veteran had a personal recovery plan. And when you would ask veterans these questions, they would be pretty wild because they said, well, nobody's ever asked me these questions before. Things like this one, what strengths do I have that help me achieve my recovery goals? And veterans would look at me and say, nobody's asked me about my strength ever. Because as psychiatrists, we're always asking what's wrong with the patient, not what's right with them. And the idea of recovery is to build upon what's right with a person. So we get a sense of where they were in terms of physical needs, meaningful activities, social relationships, holistic spirituality, wellness, mind, body, spirit, recreation, leisure, hobbies, creative expressions. Ask them what their view of recovery was and ask them to set the goals. And then what you do is also ask them what might get in the way of my recovery. And so often, people might have relapses with drugs or alcohol that might get in the way. What steps must I reach for my recovery goals? So we would break the recovery goals into little steps and then meet veterans every 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to make sure they're still moving forward on their recovery journey. At the PRC, over the 10 years I worked there, we were mandated to have certain evidence-based. Number one is evidence-based social skills training, which is an evidence-based treatment for schizophrenia, serious mental illness. Work and school support to help veterans with getting back in the community, wellness, cooking, gardening, creative arts. I have a great love for writing, art, music appreciation. We taught creative writing, which was wonderful for veterans, and mind, body exercise, physical exercise, community integration, outings and activities, self-government, and spirituality was part of our classes. We had a chaplain teaching spirituality group. And these were some of the mind-body treatments. I had an interest in yoga and developed a very secular yoga program, breathing, stretching, and relaxation, because some of the veterans were not inclined to actually do yoga due to religious reasons. So we developed a breathing, stretching, relaxation program that was very secular, but effective. We did teach, we had a mindfulness class that some of the veterans found helpful, and a dance class. These are the veterans doing a simple breathing, stretching, relaxation group. And this is this fellow is the head Mark Morris dance group instructor. And he came and trained graduate students from UCLA to teach dance to our veterans. That was really wonderful to see people with schizophrenia who often have these negative symptoms and no facial expression start to smile and move. And of course, with me knowing how much weight gain our patients had or extrapyramidal side effects, this Dance for Veterans program emanated from the Mark Morris Dance Company working with Parkinsonian patients. So if you move people with Parkinsonism, it helps. And so we thought this may help our patients who may be suffering from side effects. We published about this program, and we also published on our breathing, stretching, relaxation program for seriously mentally ill. And we created a lot of materials. So if you're interested in anything that I'm talking about here, I'm happy to share with you. This was a backyard of our building where we put together a gardening program so that veterans could grow their own food and make food and learn skills on cooking. I was hoping to get them trained so they could work in restaurants. And these are, again, just wonderful things to do, to touch the ground, to help see vegetables growing. And again, we have a spirituality class and a chaplain run spirituality class. And I met the head chaplain who then introduced me to Dr. Koenig, because Chaplain Sam said to me that Dr. Koenig needed some help in getting a scale together to measure moral injury. And I said, I'd be happy to help Chaplain Sam. Chaplain Sam Adamson was the head chaplain. And these are the definitions of moral injury that are out there in the literature. And I apologize because I do have a lot of slides. So this is going to be kind of a flyover of some of the work we've done. Happy to talk with you individually if you want more details. And then Dr. Koenig has a lot of the materials that we developed that I'll be kind of flying over so I can make sure we have time for discussion. But the definition of moral injury is perpetrating, failing to prevent, bearing witness to, or learning about acts that transgress deeply held moral beliefs and expectations. And this can happen in a combat situation, and this can happen in all of our lives, where we might do something that transgresses something that we believe we shouldn't do. And as doctors, this comes up. And a betrayal of what's right by someone who holds legitimate authority in a high stakes situation, a deep sense of transgression, including feelings of shame, grief, meaninglessness, and remorse from having violated core moral beliefs. And moral injury is not post-traumatic stress disorder, but there are overlaps in the reaction to a morally injurious event. People with moral injury suffer from insomnia, anger issues. So when Dr. Koenig and I started working together, we thought, and this is Dr. Koenig's original model, which I found really helpful for working with patients. This was the original model that I would keep this piece of paper in the office to show patients, and they would point at that and go, this is me. This is why I'm not getting better. Nobody's ever told me that this is what's really going on. So I found this very helpful to have this little piece of paper that's very powerful. So here are the kind of events: killing, violence to others, witnessing violence, not protecting, put in morally compromising position. And then the moral injury, that the inner conflict that results: guilt, shame, self-condemnation, feelings of betrayal, difficulty forgiving. How many patients do you run into who are so angry all the time? They don't forgive. And that's what that 3-point scale was measuring. Who are you angry at? And I also taught anger management for 10 years because this is a prevalent problem. I really feel like the emotion of moral injury is anger and this lack of forgiveness. Mental health outcomes: PTSD symptoms, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, sleep problems, relationship dysfunction, and pain even. This is the trolley dilemma, which has been around for a really long time, started in 1967. These are thought experiments that philosophers put out there. If you have a trolley and it's coming down some tracks, and you have the control switch so you can change the course of this trolley, which would you do? Kill the one person, allow the trolley to go this way, or kill the 5? Then they also came up with this experiment. What if the trolley's coming and you have 5 people here, but if you throw this large fellow off this bridge, he may be able to stop the trolley from killing the 5. Which would you do? These are the kind of decisions that in military combat may come up. Do we go back to get that one guy, which may cause 10 people to die? What do we do? This is a medical thought one. If we took all the organs out of this person, we might save these 5. Would you do that? This journey of learning about moral injury with Dr. Koenig was helpful for me. I worked with the chaplains, and we developed valid and reliable measures for measuring moral injury, which Dr. Koenig can share with you. We also developed a chaplain-based intervention for moral injury and a spiritually oriented cognitive process therapy. Well, actually, he and Dr. Pierce developed that. We were going to test that in a 3-way study. We started that study. And then this is the moral injury short form. The original form that Dr. Koenig tested in many hundreds of patients and colleagues was longer, but me being pragmatic, I said, Doctor, let's figure out what the 10 or the shortest form.
Donna, I think we lost you. Have we lost everybody?
We also came up with, because I saw that, sorry, I just want to make sure. So we looked at risk factors for suicide, that was related to moral injury. And this chaplain intervention, we spoke with chaplains all around the country for several meetings, and Dr. very vast knowledge of all religions developed 5 workbooks, appendices for 5 different religions: Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, and Hindu religions, because many patients or veterans would prefer to speak with a chaplain as opposed to a psychiatrist about their spiritual journeys and their spiritual or moral injurious wounds. And as a matter of fact, many veterans find it so stigmatizing to see a psychiatrist, they might be more likely to go to their church, talk to their pastor. So our hope was this chaplain intervention could be taught then to pastors and help people in the community eventually. These are the 10 moral injury dimensions in the chaplain intervention. And this is how the modules were set up for the sessions with the chaplain. With the morally injured veteran, you step through conviction, lament, repentance, confession, forgiveness, reconciliation, atonement, recovery and resilience, and anger. Also, this is the spiritually integrated CPT. CPT is the evidence-based treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder that Dr. Koenig and Michelle Pierce then made a spiritually integrated version of this evidence-based treatment, and we began testing. The idea was, if we impact moral injury we may see a reduction in post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. And then this intervention also has 5 religion appendices, specific appendices, like the chaplain one. The end of my career in my work at the VA, we did some research with chaplains and pastors and rabbis and other faith-based leaders in Los Angeles to kind of grasp what the challenges are when a veteran came in there with mental health issues. And we developed resource lists for them to help faith leaders connect to veterans with mental health care in Los Angeles. And we learned that there's a lot of issues with connection between faith-based leaders and the VA. So we wanted to fix that and work towards better cooperation and working together. And as I mentioned, physicians may have moral injury. And I realize I'm starting to run out of time pretty soon, but one other part of my work, which I will kind of fly over, was using 8 therapeutic lifestyle changes to help veterans. And it was this was a well-done review by Walsh that suggested that psychiatrists should be prescribing exercise, nutrition and diet, relaxation, stress management, community involvement, relationships, time in nature, and religious and spiritual involvement. As you can tell from the PRC, we try to integrate all that. We actually try to test this too. And during the weight loss studies that I was doing, we actually learned this study we published on exercise and nutrition, but we upgraded this work. I'm just flying through this a bit. You can have the slides at the end, and I'm happy to talk more again. But we actually found that if we asked our veterans how many people were doing these 8 things, again, this was a very simple thing to do in your own office with patients. As you can see, we involve religious and spiritual involvement is here. Again, a way to talk to your patients about these things and make goals to help them with their recovery. And you set up SMART goals. This is in accordance with Joint Commission and CARF, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound goals. And the way this works is, for any of you who know cognitive behavioral therapy, thoughts and emotion, thoughts create emotions and emotions create behaviors. My belief is that when you get people doing positive behaviors, then you have this thing going on. Let's do some exercise. Now your emotions are better. Now your thoughts are better. So a lot of times people will be dragging their feet. They don't want to exercise. You get them exercising and lo and behold, they start to feel better. Or I don't really want to go to church, but you get them to go. You have a coach work with them and they start to feel better. This is a little drawing I did for my anger management class too, about your brain is private property and you decide what you want to think about. So, this is a health education and lifestyles program. We have a participant notebook and a trainer notebook to help people set up goals and work on their therapeutic lifestyles. And lifestyle psychiatry is a real thing. And one of my friends has published a book on this. And if you're interested in getting certified to be a lifestyle psychiatrist, integrating exercise and a holistic approach, there is training available. This was a publication on the therapeutic lifestyles. And so, a lot of times we're talking about the pathology that people might have, the PTSD, the moral injury, but we also have to realize that our patients are very resilient. And we are very resilient as doctors or chaplains or clinicians a lot. And so we want to build on that resilience with therapeutic lifestyle changes involving those 8 things. I believe you bolster that resilience. And there's a Japanese term, wabi-sabi, which is an artistic belief that things are made more beautiful by imperfection. We have to realize that we're all kind of cracked pots, right? This is a kintsugi kit that my husband gave me for Christmas, and we fixed a favorite bowl with the kit with gold. So we are all like this. We all have been through challenges, our patients, ourselves, and unfortunately, a lot of doctors become burned out, and burnout is actually a term for being chronically stressed out, depletion of energy, physical, emotional, and spiritual energy. And there's seems to be a lot of suicidal thoughts, as I mentioned. 300-400 physicians are killing themselves and having suicidal thoughts. This is from a national burnout and suicide report in 2020 in America. And this is the burnout. So can you imagine 3% of people were admitting to feeling burned out or depressed? Your physicians. And so there's a lot of systemic problems that need to be changed. And there's some research and opinions out there that one of the main problems is there's very little autonomy for doctors. They don't get to schedule themselves. More and more doctors are employees or not self-employed. And we are sort of slaves to something called an electronic health record, which makes you spend more time with a computer than with your patients, because you have to cross a lot of T's and dot a lot of I's. Again, these are some thoughts of what can help doctors who are burned out. And we have staffing shortages. There were many healthcare workers who quit over vaccine mandates. So the more work you have to do with the fewer people, it's like this passage in the Bible in which you're given, the Pharaoh gives you less straw to make the bricks. And you can feel like I Love Lucy in this funny comedy where she's at a chocolate factory and the pieces of chocolate she can't put it. Perfect is the enemy of the life is measured not by the things you own or the length of your CV, but the people who loved you and the love you gave away. A lot of people feel a lot of pressure to spend a lot of money on colleges, and your kids can get a good education through the junior college system. Focus on gratitude, spend time alone with your higher power in prayer or meditation. And life isn't necessarily happy, but if your life has meaning, happiness can be a byproduct of this. So the 4 Agreements is a book by Don Miguel Ruiz, which many of my patients liked. Had some 4 ideas that were helpful and can be helpful for us as physicians. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take things personally. Don't make assumptions, and just do your best. And finally, this is a poem that I kept up in my office at all times. Do It Anyway, that was found credited to Mother Teresa, but it actually is the Paradoxical Commandments by Kent Keith. People are often unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you're kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you're successful, you'll win some false friends and some true enemies. Succeed anyway. If you're honest and frank, people may cheat you. Be honest and frank anyway. What you spend years building, someone could destroy overnight. Build anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, they may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today, people will often forget tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give the best anyway. You see, in analysis, it's between you and God. It was never between them anyway. So this is my summary slide. We're all spiritual beings on a spiritual journey. Suicide rates are high in veterans and physicians. Burnout and depression is also elevated in physicians. Identifying and addressing moral injury may be important for both veterans and physicians in suicide prevention. Spiritual graded treatments may be of value, and systemic changes are needed in medicine to improve the health of patients and physicians. A recovery-oriented, holistic, bio-psychosocial spiritual approach may be helpful for both physicians and veterans' recovery and support of their strengths, their resilience. And again, this is my plug, bio-psychosocial-spiritual. Thank you so much for listening to me, my quick flyover of 40 years of work in the field of psychiatry. And thank you, Dr. Koenig, for having me today. These are my many collaborators and people I am so grateful for. And there are references at the end of the slides. Dr. Koenig will make my slides available to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Donna, for a terrific presentation. You are so articulate in explaining so very complex subjects. I think we'll take 5 minutes now for questions from anyone on the call. So let's go ahead and have people unmute themselves and ask your question if there are any questions.
Yes, I have a question, if I may.
Yes, George, go ahead.
Thank you. I put in the chat, and I was really quite impressed by the spiritually based recovery program, which seems to parallel quite a bit with the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was wondering if you would have any experience with that program, and if your program allows veterans and others who also deal with addiction disorders to incorporate the 12-step programs into their recovery program. Thank you.
Yes, the whole recovery program is really very supportive of that. That if you are making a religious or spiritual goal on that recovery plan, it may be for veterans, they feel very supported in 12-step programs. So we work a lot with 12-step programs for our veterans. I have a personal experience with the 12-step program, as many humans do, and I think it's terrific. The program is supportive for family members. There's Al-Anon for anybody who has a family member struggling. And I think I've attended meetings myself because I felt Al-Anon really helped me with some insight into veterans. You know, so yeah, we're big proponents of including 12-step programs as part of the patient's recovery. We work that's definitely a great asset.
Who is next with a question?
I could ask one. Thank you, Dr. Ames. That was wonderful. I'm Carl Kokendorfer. I serve as a family physician at the University of Illinois in Chicago. And for the past 3 years, I've been trying to incorporate spirituality and health to our medical students. They hadn't really had much exposure or to it previously. And I'm meeting today with some colleagues to try to maybe see if we can't turn this into a faculty development session as well, because as many of us that may have gone to medical school that didn't have this topic, faculty now also have not had a lot of exposure to this topic as well. Any suggestions as to have you taken some of the work you've done and shared it with your colleagues in your own department? Any suggestions you might have to how best to approach that?
Yeah, thank you. I'm a professor at UCLA, so I trained many colleagues and students over the years. And towards the end of my career, it became more and more evident to me that when I talked about spirituality, the medical students stared at me with blank stares, like, what's that? Or how do you talk to a patient about their religion or spiritual beliefs? So I have given many lectures, and I was involved in the employee wellness committee, and I work with nursing staff. I mean, because burnout is a real issue. I was invited to give talks for the psychiatry staff in our journal club about prevention of burnout. So that was kind of a nice segue to get into the bio-psychosocial spiritual with them and sort of this orientation in the work I was doing. So yeah, I have a lot of experience of interacting with fellow psychiatrists. Actually, I went to a physical medicine conference recently and explained this, and again, bringing it home to our colleagues who, like me, probably have gone a long way from belief or even having a relationship with a higher power, and giving my own story, I think, can be very helpful to people. And I did this at a physical medicine meeting and several national conferences recently. So yes, I think this is so important. We have, as psychiatrists, doctors killing themselves, one suicide a day. Why is that? What are we filling that void with? Prestige, money? Where is a belief in something bigger than yourself, something general? And it sometimes takes a personal injury, a disease, when you're really facing death yourself. I can remember, several episodes in my life that brought me closer and closer to that. And I think many of our doctors and students would really benefit from what you're doing. So it's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Camelia Adams is next. She's got her hand up. Camelia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ames. I would be really interested to hear your opinions with your experience transitioning from a biological approach to a biopsychosocial spiritual. When you look back at the cases of schizophrenia, do you see a role for spirituality in the recovery of patients with schizophrenia and psychotic conditions as well?
Absolutely. Yes, I do. That's what I did for the last 15 years of my career, was encourage spirituality and religious involvement with people with schizophrenia, prayer, whatever things would help them. So yes, I think there's a role for every person with serious mental illness to benefit from a bio-psychosocial spiritual approach. Now, I think maybe you're heading towards the question of, sometimes we see people who are very psychotic and on the streets, and like at one point in my career, I had 4 Santa Clauses and a Jesus in a group setting. So I know what you're talking about, that there could be the point where you see people with religious delusions, but if you can share and build upon the strengths that they get from their religion and the things that can help them in their recovery. That's something amazing. Like, I had one patient with schizophrenia who could quote the Bible to me backwards and forward, and he would just write little notes like John 3:16, Dr. Ames. And of course, back then I would be like, what's that? I don't know. And then I'd have to look. And then we'd have conversations. And I think that we're so afraid in our biological minds, and we just got to medicate this guy and have him marinate in this medicine until he stops talking about all this religious nonsense. That's the way we were trained. But when you realize that's part of their coping mechanism, why would I want to suppress that? How can we use it so that it's not destroying his life or alienating him from other people or preventing him from getting a job or working productively? So many times, people that you would not believe, in my career with working with the recovery program, we had people with schizophrenia with severe delusions get jobs. Like the fellow in the picture, well, anyway, we had people, we would train them and coach them in jobs. We have an evidence-based treatment for schizophrenia where we would coach them and say, listen, when you go to that job, it's important that you don't talk about your imaginary friend, Herman, that's always with you, because the people there might not understand. So you kind of train them, and you admit, like, people hear voices, people have these delusions. We may not suppress those completely with the drugs. We certainly might not. So how do you cope with these? There's self-help programs now for people with schizophrenia called hearing voices, which sort of normalizes the fact that some people actually hear voices, but it's okay. With schizophrenia, you can have a job, you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer. It doesn't mean that because you hear voices that your life, that you do have this cancer of the soul that is hopeless. We want to instill hope.
Thank you very much.
Great answer. Now, we've run out of time, but Jim Struve, did you have a quick question you wanted to ask?
Well, I basically love you, Donna. I mean, I think back to 1930s, when AA started, and I mean, that was the first recovery model, and because there was no cure for medicine didn't have anything. And so, I mean, you have just built on it, and as Harold has done, and I mean, it's just amazing. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
if anybody wants to have conversations or needs any more information, unfortunately, if you put it in the chat, I have not been able to see the chat. I know if Dr. Koenig, you can take screenshots of the chat or something. I'm happy to answer those chat questions, or you can email me at ames@ucla.edu, and I will do my best between the different things I'm doing to get back to you. And God bless you all, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Donna, for a terrific presentation. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody here for all of your great questions.